Katie, thank you so much for joining me. This is awesome. First guest on the new launch of the Danger Close podcast. You were the first guest on the original Danger Close podcast. And now we've got some new cameras in here, some new lighting, a little bit different kind of setup. And I wanted you to be the first guest again. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Of course. I mean, I wish I could be there in person. New studio looks pretty epic, but it was an honor to be the first guest, and I'm so happy to be back. And yeah, it's good to sit down with a friend.
Yes.
And we haven't chatted up in a while, so I'm looking forward to doing that.
I know. Next time you come through, let's do another one in here, and we'll just come up here and just hang out for a little bit.
We're past ski season, so I missed that. But, you know, we'll try and get out there soon at some point.
Yeah, next year ski season, or sometimes you're passed through in the summer if you're hitting Wyoming or Idaho or whatever you're doing out and about. But let's jump in and let's talk about your path to Fox. For those who didn't listen, if people can go back to the first podcast, and we go deep into Fast and Furious in the first podcast, but that path to Fox, I think people are always wondering, like, how does somebody, graduate college and then make it to being on like every day on a cable news channel, in this case Fox? What was that path?
Well, like anything, lots of hard work, but I went to school at the University of Arizona, did a degree in broadcast journalism with a minor in political science. And once I graduated, I knew that I wanted to move to DC. And in college, I did an internship with Senator John Kyle, who was the senator in Arizona at the time, and did a summer with him. And then I moved to DC actually between my junior and senior years of college, and worked at the news outlet that I work for now in a higher capacity, obviously, townhall.com. And I interned there, and I really just dove right in. I stayed in the dorm room with two other girls, George Washington University, rather, which is right down the street from the White House. So it was very cool to be in that environment. And I would take the subway to work, and I would walk home through Georgetown. So that was a very interesting experience. And I always tell young journalists, if you're ever interested in really just getting a lot at once and, working like dog years, one feels like seven, DC is the place to do it. There's always tons of stuff going on, whether you want to cover the White House, the Justice Department, Capitol Hill. If you're, maybe you're more interested in outdoor policies, you want to cover the Interior Department or the Environmental Protection Agency. There's just so much going on all the time. And of course, you have international events that happen, and prime ministers from other countries who are at war, at peace, who have been allies with maybe some people you're not so friendly with coming to town. There's always a protest of some kind to go cover. Jeez. So I worked in DC for the summer, went back to school and worked for free throughout my senior year. And then I moved back to DC after being offered a job. So I came here, I moved around by myself, didn't really know anybody outside of my colleagues. And I was young and hungry and went to everything I could. I went to every happy hour with all my business cards that I had, and I was always running around trying to get to that next thing and try to see what I could do, and covering hearings on Capitol Hill. And my path to Fox is actually an interesting one, because I was at this conference called CPAC. It's the Conservative Political Action Conference, and I had gone as a student many years in a row. And I was at this reception with my colleagues, but it was the first time I was working as a young professional, not just there as a student trying to network and introduce myself to get a job. And it was really hot and it was packed, and you're trying to be a professional and figure out how to present yourself when you're this young person with all these people you see and whatever. And so I see Greg Gutfeld walk in with his producer and his booker. And so I say, okay, I gotta go talk to him. Obviously, I've always wanted to be on Fox. I grew up watching Hannity and Combs. I wanted to debate Alan Combs so badly, and wanted to be part of that. And that was a goal of mine. And so if you know anything about Greg, he doesn't have a lot of patience for certain things. And I could overhear him complaining about how busy it was and how the line for the bar was too long. And so I rushed over and pushed through all these people. And I said, and they were talking about they were going to leave before I had a chance to talk to them, and they couldn't leave. So I went over and I kind of pushed my way in, and being tall helps because I'm on the taller side. And I said, I'll get you a beer. What do you want? Don't even worry about it. So I cut the line at the bar, got them all beers, brought them back. Oh, thank you very much. That's great. We'd love to have you on the show. like mission accomplished. And so I have this thing called Katie's Law, which is like Murphy's Law. What can go wrong will. And so I bought myself a bus ticket to go to New York City for the weekend. I was going to stay with my brother who was in school in Hoboken across the river at the time at engineering school. And 3 hours into this 5-hour bus ride where I'm booked to be on Gutfeld, to get on Fox for the first time, this is my one shot. The tsunami in Japan happens. So they canceled the show.
Wow.
And I'm already on my way to New York. And of course, it's a horrible event, obviously. But the most important part of that was that I was affected, clearly. And now I couldn't be on the show. And so I thought I missed my chance. Luckily, they rebooked me. Nice. I go to New York, do the show, get on Fox for the first time. And it's funny because they didn't pay for travel. So that's why I booked my own bus ticket at the time because I had no money at all. But they do book you a car service in the city. So I get in this fancy car. It's the first time I've ever been in like a black car service or whatever. And I'm going to my brother's dorm room where I'm sleeping on the floor. You know, he lives with 2 other dudes. It's this tiny little dorm room. They're all engineers. So not a lot of other women around. The joke is that their GPA is higher than the number of women they see in a year. And so I'm going over to this dorm room and this driver looks at me and he's about to drop me off because he pulls up to the address and he says, "Are you sure this is where you're supposed to be going?"
Nice.
It's like, yes, that's where I'm supposed to be going. Thank you very much. So that was the first time getting on Fox, but in a more serious way, because of my work in DC and with the book that you have on your graciously have on your table, which was published so long ago now, I started covering that story and was doing a lot of TV, and that led to doing a lot of CNBC and CNN and Fox. And eventually Fox offered me a contributorship, and that's where it really started. So I was covering the 2012 election, and that rolled into just a bunch of other topics. And just being based in DC, I was able to really grab on to all these congressional hearings that were happening. And I remember the first time that I got to do a special report, it was the day that the former Attorney General, Eric Holder, was held in contempt. And it was in June. So I was wearing a sleeveless dress and I didn't have a jacket. And I got asked to go on special report. So I had to borrow a jacket from a friend. Good life lesson for all you young people. Always have a coat jacket with you in your office or in your bag. Always have one. And I got to sit on the panel at special report with like Charles Krauthammer, Brett Baer. So it's just been really fun. And I've been able to do a lot of great things. And I'm very grateful for all of it. And just work hard and pursue lots of different options, really. Say yes a lot and gobble up what you can.
I didn't know the story about buying Gutfeld a beer. I think that's fantastic. Yeah. But I love when you post the picture of your first time on Gutfeld, on Red Eye at the time, right?
Yeah,
so it was Red Eye.
Yep.
So what time was Red Eye on? And what time did you guys film it?
So I can't remember exactly what time we filmed it. I think it was around 7 o'clock. We filmed around 7 p.m.
Yeah.
But it played at 3 a.m.
3 a.m. Wow.
3 a.m. Yeah. So it was a 3 a.m.er.
Wow. It seems
like
I should have.
You know, I wanted to be professional, so I wasn't sure how I would handle it because it was a late night show.
Right. Because it's different.
Want to ruin my career before it started.
Exactly. And, that's a strange one to be on first.
Yeah. So I think I handled it okay. I survived.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So how nervous were you then, or were you nervous compared to now when you're on essentially every day?
So definitely have a lot more experience now, but I feel like I have bigger responsibility now because of the things that I get assigned to do. So I wouldn't say I still get nervous, but I do still feel like it's never an easy thing necessarily, right? You always want to prepare, make sure you have a new set of facts. My goal is always to teach people something new that they haven't heard before, because like you always say, time is everybody's most valuable resource. And if they're going to spend it with me, then I feel like I owe them something valuable, even if it's just a sentence about something they were not aware of. So definitely still take that very seriously. But at the beginning, of course, it was much more nerve-wracking. I remember the first time I went on MSNBC and they sat me in this room. Because when you think about TV, you've never done it before, you think it's this big studio with lots of lighting and all this space. And if you're a guest, typically they put you in like a black box with a background, and then it's just kind of like visor, right? You know, horse blinders, really, where it's the dark.
It's horrible.
And you're just staring. Yeah. And so that's a skill set you have to learn as well. It's not just sitting down and talking. You have to really think about and stay focused on what you're saying. And a lot of times you can't see the person. So you're not seeing their facial expressions or their mannerisms. You're simply listening to them and trying to gauge, is this the best time to jump in? Is this, it's just a whole different way of debating and presenting an issue. So I did MSNBC, and I remember one time I was so nervous and I just felt like a duck on water. Like my feet were moving at a million miles an hour.
Yeah.
And luckily it's been okay.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's certainly something that you have to get used to. And not to say that you don't gain confidence and that you get better at it. Absolutely. I'm a much different person skill wise 10 years ago, 10 years ago than I am today. But I do still think I have the same feeling of wanting to do a really good job, no matter what the topic, or if we've talked about it a million times, how can I go at this in a different way so people can understand it from a different perspective? So that's really kind of what I've tried to do.
Yeah.
And I'm hosting more now too, which is a whole different thing as well. So
yeah, I want to ask you about that, how different that is. But yeah, for people that don't know, because if you're just watching TV, you think because of Zoom and FaceTime and the time in which we live that you can see the host and you can gauge that body language and facial expressions and the nods, and you can realize, oh, it's time to move on, or I should keep talking, or I should wrap it up. Zero. You have zero of that most of the time, and you're just staring into that box. My first one was New York, but it was a closet. The one I go to for Fox here is down in Salt Lake, and it's a larger room, but there's still just one person behind the camera.
Yeah.
And I say no to the makeup person. I feel, but I just can't do it. But there's just the one guy who I know now, and he has trucks and he likes, firearms. We talk about all that stuff or whatever. And I make sure I bring books and leave them there and then give them to him for anybody any friends that want them or that sort of a thing. So it's great having that I'm comfortable with him, but it's still just him behind a camera, and all you're doing is hearing. And I think the first Fox one that I did, so the New York one was a closet. It was like super small, and that was crazy because I didn't expect it. My publicist dropped me off there, and I'm in there,
You're like
in a closet, and I just have this thing in my ear, and I'm like, what on earth? And it was kind of
shanked in here. What
is exactly. It was so crazy. Like, is this one of those? Like, is there a camera on me, and this is just a joke? And then it was one of those ones, and I'll tell you who the host was later. I'm blanking on his name right now, but it was kind of like a red eye situation where it was one of those ones where they're like they're just like it's semi-comedy, but also serious, where they're trying to get you to say something that put words in your mouth almost to make you.
I don't know what to do.
Like, exactly, right. And the first question was something like crazy off the wall type thing that I wasn't prepped. I wasn't prepared at all. I thought it was just going to be a conversation, and it's sensory deprivation chamber. Tiny. Like, it was like you couldn't hear anything because it was like, I guess they did radio and other stuff in the building or whatever. So it was weird. So that one, then the Fox one, it's not a sensory deprivation chamber down there. It's there's lights and it's all set up so you don't feel like claustrophobic, and they have the background and that's fine. But it's still
you never
weird.
know what you're gonna get.
You never know what you're gonna get, but it's still weird not seeing the host.
For everything.
Yeah, totally weird. And then sometimes you go in thinking it's one subject, and then all of a sudden they're playing the thing ahead of time, and they're like, "You're ready to come in," and all you hear is that. But then you're like, "Wait, what?" They're playing a little video that's not what I thought, and then you're in, and then Tucker's asking you a question. You're like, "Here we go." So I guess I'm more comfortable with it now, but it is an uncomfortable situation to be in.
Well, and one thing that has definitely changed, which is I find interesting just in terms of experience, is there's been a number of situations where I'm supposed to be on for a certain topic.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there and news breaks.
Right.
30 seconds before I'm going on, or 2 or 3 minutes, right, in the break. And I'm expected to change course and know how to handle whatever's just happened. So most recently, it was I was supposed to be on air to talk about polling or something, and it was 2:59. I wasn't supposed to be on until 3:15. And they're like, "We need to go get seated. This special counsel report just dropped. It's 300 pages long. This is what we're doing now." So you're pulling it up on your phone, you're scrolling through to see what the executive summary says, what is the conclusion? Are there charges that are being brought? How many of them are there? So stuff like that happens more often than not. And so you have to really grow into that role where you can handle pivoting pretty quickly when it comes to those big, serious topics where you don't want to get your facts wrong and you don't have very much time to really navigate what's happening.
Right. And then being able to provide context, which helps just being well read and just understanding what's going on and in the world in general, but having the history also to fall back on to put things in context when you have that 30 seconds or those 2 minutes. It's just crazy. And in COVID, they had the van that went to you and you had to do that.
I was just going to bring up the van.
The van's wild.
The vans are great. They're very convenient, but they're nuts. Like when COVID happened, I was in a van every day with the same guy and he was awesome. Yeah. But it was an interesting relationship because we were spending all this time together in the van, like we were buddies, but like it's also COVID. So we're these two people in the van. We're supposed to be in the van together. I don't know. And it just was a really weird time to do things. And then there was all these delays with the infrastructure of the way the shows were working. And then you went from being at a table with people in person to basically the Brady Bunch. Right. I mean, Fox did an amazing job of making sure everything did not slow down at a single second. Right. But then it's a totally different structure, right? So you're getting used to something else. But we made it through. It's all good.
Yeah, no, it's wild. I did the van for when Tulsi went on for Tucker a couple summers ago, and it was her first time doing it, hosting that show. And so she asked me to come on, and I was like, yes, but I was on an island off New York, and so I had to find a way to get off the island because there wasn't like a ferry that was going at those times. So I had to get a boat. I did my best. I had to get a boat, had to get someone that knew how to use it. So I had to figure out how to liberate this boat, get the guy who knew how to do it, zip across, track down the van in the marina parking lot, get into the van, but there wasn't signal there. So he's like, I just know where signal is. We got to go. And so we're like super fast, like pull over to the side of the highway, like with cars going. He's like, we have signal here. You have like 30 seconds. Jump out. The whole time I was on, I thought we were going to get hit by a semi because it was night. It was nighttime on the East Coast. So we're pulled over to the side and it's all soundproofed and everything. So but it's still cars going by.
You're like, I'm not going to hear it coming.
I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah, there's no seat. I'm not going to have a seatbelt in the back of that thing. But once again, you're looking into the same just blank box essentially of the camera with the driver who's also the camera person. Exactly. I thought that could happen.
Like, sir.
Yeah, exactly.
This is not a parking space.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Exactly. So I'm thinking that the whole time. So that's in the back of my head. Like what's going to happen as I'm trying to talk about, I think we were talking about Afghanistan withdrawal or something like that. But yeah, it's interesting all that, but it's still, technical solution that allows us to do these things. And it's
and having to focus while all that stuff is happening around you, and act like it's not going on. So the audience can't tell. It's just wild.
Good. What's have you ever regretted something that you've said on air in one of those situations where either something changes or not, or a question comes that at you and all of a sudden the camera is on you that you didn't expect or didn't quite prep for, or in your head you're like, oh, what do I think of that? Interesting. Okay. Because you don't have time to think. I mean, you've got to talk. Right. That camera moves to you and they're like, Katie, what do you think about XYZ? And you're like, okay, this is it. Is there anything that you regret? You don't have to say exactly what it is, but are there things, not just like I could have done that better, but are you like, oh.
Yeah, there's a few things where.
Because I've never noticed it. That's what I'm going to say, because you're fantastic on it.
Good.
So I've never noticed it.
The internet does.
Yeah.
The internet notices
it's out there
everything.
Forever. Yeah.
So that's, not always. It's good for accountability reasons, but it's not always the kindest way for people to handle things. No. There's been a few pile-ons of things that I've said that felt unfair because it just was taken out of context. Right. But, we're all human. I've gotten a fact or two wrong on maybe a historical date or a fact in a case or something like that. But generally speaking, I really try to not get any of those things wrong because my approach is facts first, opinion second. So, but yeah, there's been some times that were severely uncomfortable. Absolutely.
Interesting. Because you don't notice it. Sometimes you notice when someone, like you're always so calm, cool, collected, logical, firm, like awesome. And sometimes it goes to somebody, not even on just any channel, whatever, where they get like emotional, about it, or they're like, they're saying something, they're making the argument and they say the wrong state or the wrong country. And you obviously know what they meant, like in context, they're just going, but then it's one of those things you can pull out of context. That's why I tend to be, I was always very forgiving, but I'm even more forgiving now, I think, because it's so easy to pull something out like, oh, look at this person. They said Ukraine, should have said Russia, or they meant this, it's China, this. It's like, they're in the heat of the
Especially
thing.
Especially when you're doing live TV. And also there's a big difference between, and you can tell when someone is overtly trying to lie or to spin something, or if they just get something mixed up, right? Like that, that can be pretty clear. And you don't want to do it a lot because if it becomes a habit, then you look like you don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, I mean, things do happen. I think I said, so this is actually a debate. I was on the Five once and we were talking about Google's pod or whatever it is. You know how Amazon has Alexa?
Okay.
There was a story about, would you put one of these in your house? And I was like, absolutely not. I would chuck it right in the backyard. And apparently I said the other thing with the F word.
Oh, this really?
But no one noticed it until later.
Oh, wow.
Like the internet thought I said the F word, but I thought I said chuck it. And I went like this.
Yeah. So,
like with my hand.
Yeah.
So there was emotion, but that was a big debate and that was an accident. But I just, I guess Freudian slip on that one because I do feel that way about those things.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I understand totally.
But I was just motioning to
yeah.
throw it in the yard and then preferably shoot it with a shotgun. Because no, thank you.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I want to work. I'm working my way towards like no phone at all.
Yeah,
I'm working my way. Yeah, that's my goal. My goal leaving the military was never to have a resume or a card, so I've been successful in that. But now it's to work my way away
now you're
from
just
this.
Very famous. You don't need either one.
I didn't want to ever have to have that, but now I want to get rid of this thing at some point because it's obviously listening as well, just maybe not as overtly as Alexa.
I have bad news for your friend. It's going to be a while before you can get rid of that phone.
Oh, well, maybe I'll have somebody else carry it or something. I don't know. It's just, it's like, it's always there. I do. And it's so crazy. It's still, I mean, people talk about it all the time, but like my wife and I will be talking about going somewhere for a trip and then all of a sudden, there it is in my feed, and we've never talked about it before. I don't follow any tennis people, and my wife plays tennis, and now I've screenshot it. I didn't even do that thing where you click the, send it or whatever. I just did the screenshot and sent it to her, and now all tennis stuff, tennis everywhere. It's like, I try to do.
You just mention it, and they're like, "Oh, do you need some, boots that are waterproof for your trips to wherever you're going?" And it's like, I have them. Thank you. Why did you ask me that? Yeah, it's wild. Well, it gives you lots of good writing material, though. Alice is a character now as a result. So
it certainly does.
You can learn something from it.
Yep, it certainly does. And this next one that's coming out here in June, so it'll come out by the time this podcast drops. Alice is back in full form.
I don't think I like her very much, but that's
scary. Okay. I know she could go, well, I'm not going to give anything away right now. Well, you'll find, you'll have a copy very, very soon here. The 6 Hour P365 X Macro. Slim and easily concealable. Patented 17+1 capacity magazine. Choose from a 3.7 inch barrel or a compensated 3.1 inch barrel. Expansion chamber slide reduces muzzle rise by up to 30%. X-ray 3 sights for precise sight acquisition, day or night. Nitron coated finish. The 6 Hour P365 X Macro. The choice of James Reese and me, Jack Carr. When you're going back to when you interned in politics or in your last year, a couple of years in college, what was the most surprising thing to you? Did you have a vision of DC and politics and based on films and TV and things that you'd studied, books you'd read, and then when you showed up there, what was most surprising to you or shocking, or what was like you thought it was going to be and what was like it wasn't?
So I'll start with the positives. I get to drive by Pentagon, which of course there are thoughts about that too, but just the idea of these places. I get to drive by Arlington Cemetery pretty much every morning. I can walk to the National Mall and anytime I want and see the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, the Thomas Jefferson Memorial, the World War II Memorial, the Vietnam Memorial, the Korean War Memorial. And it just kind of takes your breath away every single time. And I've told myself when it doesn't, it's time to go, because these are things that mean something in terms of the history of the world. And America is an amazing, amazing place, unique place. And that's why so many people fight in their whatever capacity in the military or in other ways to preserve what America is supposed to be. And, I see so many people come to DC from all over the world to experience our country. And you see all these kids come for spring break every year to learn about the sacrifices when they walk to the World War II Memorial and they find their state, right? And they look at the Pacific side and the Atlantic side. And whenever I walk by, I think of my grandfather in the Pacific side and the fact that I would not be here, literally, if he had not gone to war in the Philippines against the Japanese in World War II, because he got sick with malaria and he got sent to an Australian hospital. And that's where he met my grandmother. And they eloped in Australia. And he sent her back to Globe, Arizona by herself, went back to the war, survived, and came back. And that's why I exist. So seeing stuff like that really makes me feel proud to be able to work in a place that so many people come to visit. And it is outside of the government and the people who live in this city, and the corruption and the bad decision making and the lack of accountability. It really is so meaningful to me to see that kind of thing every day and to see people appreciate it. But then on the other side, I've learned a lot about the underbelly of the beast and why it's called the swamp, and the kinds of people who come in and out of this place. I've been here for a long time. It's a very transient place where people come in and out depending on who's in power. And then you have people who have been working inside of these agencies for too long, who are not elected, who are part of this administrative state that just feeds on itself to take away people's freedoms and through rulemaking or whatever. And that's a kind of a difficult thing to swallow because it feels overwhelming in terms of, turning that around and getting back to basics and stopping them from interfering in people's lives in ways that are unconstitutional and that was never intended. So, I would say those are probably the two big things. And then just human nature in general. DC is a place where a lot of people come to grab onto power, and their idea of what's right and wrong can be very different depending on what their goals are. So
interesting. I love the story about Globe, Arizona and Australia. And you've told me that before. I always love that story. Imagine going to Globe, Arizona. But I guess it depends on where you're from in Australia also. Like maybe there are some very remote
Bondi
places
Beach.
In Australia. Okay.
Well. She was from Bondi.
Okay. Well, maybe she was aware.
She was a dedicated woman.
Yeah.
Because if she left Bondi Beach for Globe, which Globe's fine, beautiful in its own way, but it's not Sydney, Australia.
Right. And imagine it in the 40s, that's such a cool story. Jumping back to when you slipped up and swore on, and they didn't catch it. How do they, do they just know that on, Gutfeld, that they're going to be ready? Like they have 30 seconds or 20 seconds or whatever it is. And that's expected, rather than when you're watching like Special Report, you're like, maybe your hand isn't, right over the bleep button. What is that like kind of?
Well, I think if you're going on Special Report, you understand that if you were to do something like that, you probably wouldn't be invited back.
Right.
Whereas if you do it on Gutfeld, they can bleep it out with plenty of time. Right. And, they kind of look at your personality and how prone you are to making those kinds of statements. I typically am not, but when it comes to Alexa being in the house, apparently he just has some strong feelings about it.
Yeah. Because I've always wondered about that, and how. There's a lot of it, and the 5 too every now and again. So 5's like in the middle, I guess. Like sometimes you have people on there where it's like, okay, we should be close to the button. Maybe Special Report, not so much. Gutfeld, you're hovering right there the whole time, type of a thing. But that part's always so interesting to me. And so, what is it like when you go on there now? Because it's a similar format, I guess, to what Red Eye was back in the day. I mean, there's multiple people and you're discussing things and it's fun. And you can get away with a lot more just in commentary because you can have that comedic spin to it. And so I think it's a brilliant concept, and actually like lowers the stress level for people that watch. Because if you're just watching the other stuff, you're just like, oh my goodness, it's just like so much bad news constantly. And then you get, okay, now we're going to put a little spin on this thing that might,
we're going to make fun of all the bad news.
Make fun of it a little bit and just maybe it's not so bad. Or at least there's another lens with which to view some of these things that maybe everybody can laugh at.
Yeah. No, I just like the idea that comedy is being allowed again.
Yeah.
And in a different perspective. I mean, you usually hear from comedians that don't have a right-leaning or libertarian stance. And Greg brings a lot of comedians onto a show to give them a platform to tell their jokes and to make fun of things and to laugh about how serious things can be, or to just make fun of things that we all agree on that are silly, but we're not allowed to say, right? So it's fun. And I think it's really a good time because you can, you don't have to wear the suit on Gutfeld. Like you can get a little more creative with your wardrobe and wear the boots with the rhinestones kind of thing. And just have a little more fun with it. And there's a live audience, which is also a whole new fun thing to deal with. So it's been great.
Yeah. What's your favorite part of the news business, whether it's being on TV or townhall.com, writing? Like, what's your favorite part of being in that industry?
Two things. I would say the people that you get to meet that you wouldn't be able to meet otherwise. And then I would say the number one favorite thing is that you have a front row seat to history. Every day is different. You're sitting and watching these things unfold right in front of you. So, in 20 years, I think about in 20 years when I'm looking back on the 2016 election or the 2020 election or this year's election or the war in Israel or, when they killed Qasem Soleimani, for example, or when the Abraham Accords were announced. There's this context of how we got there and the work that you're doing and seeing it unfolding, right? So that is my favorite part is you're seeing these things firsthand and you're really experiencing and not just always good things, like really difficult things as well that you're watching unfold. And so I think it gives you a different perspective too on having respect for people who have been doing this for a while because they have the perspective of, okay, this happened in the 1980s and this is where we are now and this is why. And it just gives you, if you're willing to, listen and learn, a better perspective on what things might look like in the future and to really appreciate that what you're seeing now is going to matter in 20 years. And you're lucky and privileged to be one of the people who's experienced it. So you can explain it to others who might be curious about the history of the country. And so I find it interesting that, the White House press corps and the people in DC really are writing the history of America. And given the kinds of people who are in the majority of those positions, I'm not so sure that's a good thing, but there's some people who are trying to do the opposite. So that's good.
Yeah, no, so interesting. What was it like to work with Charles Krauthammer when he was with us and on, and just hear his perspective?
He just was such a funny, nice guy. He had such a great sense of humor. I remember he used to complain about the studio being too cold all the time. And I remember standing, and then I was in Tampa, Florida for the 2012 RNC convention, and all the reporters were standing in this parking lot waiting for the bus to take us back to the convention center. And Charles was in a wheelchair and he just came by, cruising by with his automatic wheelchair, just beating all of us. And we're all waiting for the bus. So he had an advantage on us there, but he just was someone who had so much wisdom and was so kind. And whenever someone new showed up, he acknowledged them and wanted to get to know who they were and talk to them. It's not like he was ever unavailable to people who were working with him in a large capacity or small.
Yeah.
And his life story is just so incredible too. I mean, how could you not be inspired by, a guy who was an athlete, then became a quadriplegic and still went on to have a family and this amazing career. I mean, talk about just having faith in yourself and not letting some serious injury ruin the rest of it for you. It really is an inspiration, both in terms of his intellectual ability, but just his ability as a person to get over such, adversity in your life early on.
Yeah.
As a young man.
Yeah. His book has so much wisdom in it. And recently, let's go to recent topics. You were just in Israel. And how long were you there? Over a week, right?
I was there for about a week. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And I was there right after the big rocket barrage, actually.
Jeez. And
so,
yeah, what was, you've been obviously following this. It's, from the beginning, obviously, but what was it like to be there now? So it's been a few months since October, world opinion shifting ish. There's all sorts of outside influences, maybe manipulating some of these thoughts and behaviors because you can do that so readily right now with all the social media platforms. So what was it like to be there and see all of this firsthand? And you've been there before. And what is the difference between the times that you were there before and now? Maybe not so much in places down south or border regions anywhere, but some of the other places where maybe aren't getting rocketed. I mean, everybody's going to be rocketed right now, but maybe that aren't on the front lines of it, even though the whole thing is on front lines. But what are some of the differences that you noticed, let's say in Tel Aviv or in general?
So for those of you who have never been to Israel, it's a super pro-American country. They, I see American flags. They're everywhere. They love America. It's a country full of people who want to have fun and live their lives. And there are religious people in the country. There are secular people in the country. It's a very dynamic place with lots of industry and business. And it's a Western democracy. And it's a really fun place to be. And it's also a very meaningful place to go for Jerusalem, of course, and places like Hebron. And there's all the biblical history of the country. So that's just the basic background. The first time I went was in 2014, specifically during Operation Protective Edge, which was another more minor war between the Gaza Strip and Israel. And that was 10 years ago, which is wild. And I went because there were all these stories about what was happening to the Palestinians, which is fine. But there was no perspective on what Israeli civilians were going through. And inherently, when a rocket is fired from the Gaza Strip into Israel, they're firing at civilian targets. They're not firing at military targets. Their targets are always civilians. And so I went to a hospital in Ashkelon and wrote about how they were transferring premature babies permanently into bomb shelters, because in Ashkelon you only have 15 seconds to get into a shelter. So there was a NICU set up inside of a shelter. And so I told that story. We went down south and experienced running into these shelters while rockets were getting shot out of the air by the Iron Dome. And it was just really interesting to see then the way that Israelis deal with this, and there are bomb shelters in kindergarten playgrounds. There are bomb shelters in hospitals, and they just have to keep building more of them as time has gone on. But experiencing that for the first time just give you perspective on what really happens there. So you fast forward to 2024 and you have October 7th happen, arguably because the situation was not dealt with properly 10 years ago when they were shooting rockets and building tunnels. And I was there. I came back. I went back about a month ago and did a tour down south to one of the kibbutzes that had been taken over by these Hamas terrorists. And this woman who was giving us the tour survived the day, but her husband was murdered. And she took us around this community, and there are these I put some of the photos on my Instagram page if people are interested in looking at them. But they're all these burned out homes. You walk into the kitchen, there's just nothing left. And there's spray painted symbols outside of the homes to identify how many people were killed there, if people were not killed there, people who were taken hostage. Their photos were on posters and banners outside of the homes, burnt bicycles that belong to children. And then you walk right next to the fence and you see that IDF soldiers going. This was right before the Rafah invasion, probably a week and a half before they started going in. And for me, it's very difficult to accept this changing of public opinion or justification that we've been seeing creep in. And really it hasn't really creeped in, because on October 8th, there was a lot of this going on with people who just justify terrorism as a way to get to an end goal or a political means. But when you walk through people's homes that were burned down or had anti-tank missiles shot at them, people dragged out, shot, murdered, killed. And before I had gone to this neighborhood, I had seen the footage that the Israeli government put out, not publicly because they want to respect the families, but you're walking through these neighborhoods and you're seeing what you saw in the video from the Hamas GoPros and from the security cameras. And you start recognizing, oh, I remember this intersection. That's where this happened. Or I remember this woman, her face. And then we went down to the Nova Music Festival site where there were thousands of young people dancing. And hanging out with their friends. And the irony of all of this is that most of these people were peace activists. They had employed a lot of these Palestinians in their homes, these Gazans in their homes, and the way that they repaid them was by collecting intelligence and then coming in and slaughtering them. And so walking through the field of the Nova Festival, where they have photos of all of the victims who are young people, Americans, people from 32 different countries who are just killed for who they are. It just was a really interesting, harrowing experience that really solidified in my mind already what the cause is, and that this cannot continue. And there's a reason why. If you don't want a war, don't start one. And if you're going to start one by slaughtering people dancing at a music festival or people eating breakfast in their homes, there are consequences for that.
Yeah. Have you noticed so I post different incidents from history, mostly involving terrorism on my social channels, just to keep those lessons alive type thing. And it's obviously something that impacted me early on in life and something I'm writing about now in the next book, the nonfiction on 1983 Beirut barracks bombing, Marine barracks. Right. And there was always like one or two comments, that were, obviously, crazy, thoughtless, heartless, odd. Anyway, just there was always a couple of those going back to when I started doing this, like 4 or 5 years ago when I started doing the history posts. But after October 7th, the number of people that post things like that or comment like that are comfortable posting. I mean, you never know if they're real people or not. Even if you click on them, maybe you can make it seem like it. Like, who knows? But so many more than I thought. I knew there'd be a little uptick. I did not expect for there to be that large of an uptick. And people really, I mean, I just can't, how are you so comfortable supporting what you just saw Hamas do? You're supporting a terrorist organization that just did this to women and children. And that's the side that you pick. It's very interesting.
Well, and you make a good point. Like, you saw Hamas do it. Like, they literally filmed themselves doing it. It's not like, I mean, even if you should, there's a lot of security footage as well from the security cameras, but they purposely filmed themselves and put out this video on for a reason. It's them showing the world who they are. And when you watch the videos and you listen to them laughing and saying, take my photo, take a video, while they execute people next to their children, or when we were down south and we were going into these bomb shelters. I mean, this just explains how organized the day was, because in Israel, when rockets go off, people run to bomb shelters. So they sent rockets over, people ran into the bomb shelters, and then the terrorists went to the bomb shelters and they threw in grenades and they murdered all the people in the bomb shelters. And you go down and it's just bus stop after bus stop, because there's always a bomb shelter next to a bus stop because it's an open area. So people go into the bomb shelter just in case there's ever a rocket. And there's candles in there. There's dozens of candles. And you can see where the grenades went off on the floor. And so, they've repainted them to try to move on. Like, this is how Israeli culture is. It's like, we're not going to sit around and let this, deter us from living our lives and being happy. But they've repainted them. But the grenades that you see in the kitchens or in the medical clinic in the kibbutz we went to that went off, they just systemically killed everybody. And when they went to the bomb shelters, they threw in the grenades and killed everybody hiding in the bomb shelters. And they filmed themselves doing it. And so there's obviously so much you could get into about what that means, and the history of terrorism, which you so amazingly do on your Instagram page and through your writing. But it's a deeper issue than just one incident, as horrific as October 7th was. There's a whole thousands of years of history. And when it comes to, I think, the tie between how anti-American and anti-Israel these groups in America have become, there's no coincidence there. I mean, if you go back to the foundation of the country, George Washington and John Adams say in their writing that they were inspired by the exodus from Egypt to the promised land, which is modern day Israel, to take on the British Empire and to found America. And if you go back and look at the seals that were proposed for this country, that wasn't the eagle initially, it was Moses leading the people across the desert to freedom. And so those things are tied together in a deep way that is difficult to understand, just like it's difficult to understand, like, how can people be defending this? Because it's a deeper, I think, issue of, I think, even a level that's above us that we don't quite understand in terms of what's going on.
Yeah. And it's not even, it's even more, it's worse than defending, it's supporting.
Right. Actively pro murder.
Yeah. And, I didn't know about the George Washington connection until I saw it put when you posted it a few weeks ago on your Instagram. So I was like, oh, no way. I didn't know this. And then I think you took pictures of like in Israel of George Washington. It was like George Washington Street and the monument and all that sort of a thing, which was really cool. I didn't know that until I saw it.
There's a George Washington Street, Lincoln Street, both in Jerusalem. There's the Liberty Bell in a park in Jerusalem. And of course, Israel has a 9/11 memorial for us in Israel because we have this shared fight against this Islamic terrorism that has been a blight on the world for a very long time and unfortunately is on the march.
Yeah. And then we look at college campuses and taking away like the agitators or the people that are paid to be there or the activists that are there take those people out. And the actual college kids that are there, let's say, who knows how many of them are versus how many people are outside agitators coming in and doing all that sort of a thing. But let's just take the college people that are there. I mean, how could you not, even at that age, 18, 19, 20, not take a breath for 2 seconds and think, oh, wait a sec, if I was at that music festival, those kids are kind of my same age. If I was there, think about being at Stagecoach or whatever, some of these other places, whatever, old school Lollapalooza, whatever, some concert. And, wow, wait a second, I'd be dead right now. Oh, wait a second, am I on the right side of this? What am I doing out here marching around yelling at this, this Jewish professor walking by or whatever it might be, or fellow student walking by trying to get to class? Like, crazy. How can you be so unself-aware? You'd be dead right now.
Yeah, like you'd be dead. And my favorite is the Queers for Palestine. Like, feel free to go.
An interesting one.
You won't be coming back. No, it's alarming. It's quite alarming. And I think it shows the larger problem in America right now with the lack of real purpose. And so people want to be part of a group. And if this is what they want to be part of and it makes them feel like they have friends, then they'll do it without understanding the real consequence of what they're actually doing. But I will say that like the majority of college students are not doing this and they disagree with it. I mean, when you saw those frat guys at UNC foisting the American flag back up and telling all these people like, no, like we're going to put our flag back up. And then to see them raise like $300,000 for a party to celebrate that victorious moment. I give them $100.
Nice.
Like, absolutely. They don't get as much attention as the people who are morally bankrupt. And so it's good to give them some credit too, but it is quite alarming that there are certain people who are justifying what's happening and advocating for more of it among their fellow citizens.
Yeah. It's like the loud voices on X or social in general, like, is it a real person? I don't know. Okay. Is it a real person? Okay. Who are they retweeting or something from, or how are they manipulated into thinking this way? It's a very interesting case study in general. It's alarming in general. And one of the first things I think, for like our kids that I talk about is just that awareness of, hey, these things are meant to manipulate you. Like, maybe first into some advertising and buy this and that, but now it's thoughts and behaviors, and also completely disrespectful to those generations who came before us, who sacrificed everything so that we could have these options and opportunities today, so that you can go out there and make a bad decision. But it is completely disrespectful to those generations that did that for us. So I think the first step is like realizing that you're being manipulated, which is hard to do when something's thrown at you every 15 seconds on TikTok that has the intent of distracting you or manipulating that behavior. So you have to take yourself out of that for a second and then realize, oh, I'm being manipulated by almost everything that happens on here. I'm going to take a breath and a break from this thing and maybe get into the pages of a book to dive into some history, so I have a foundation from which to make my own decisions in the future. Well, thanks to those people who sacrificed everything for us.
Exactly. That's why it's been so important and amazing. Like people like you who advocate for the Best Defense Foundation and are showing the stories of these guys who took on Nazi Germany. Like we did not go and beat back Hitler on the European continent for you guys to act like this.
Yeah.
Like it's not okay. It's completely inappropriate. You guys have no idea what it's like to actually sacrifice for something. No clue. I mean, it's like, I know we laugh about it, but these college students who take over buildings and then demand humanitarian aid.
That was crazy.
It's like, they have no idea. None. Yeah. And I think, like you said, the disrespect is very difficult to stomach when you've seen and you've touched and held the hands and shaken the hand and listened to the stories of the men and women who have done these things for us. And so just got to keep telling those stories, right? And explaining why it really matters. That's all we can do.
Complete lack of self-awareness on so many people's part. It's insane. But you got to go with Best Defense Foundation last year to Normandy for the 79th D-Day commemoration events. And I went the year before for 78th, and then I'm going back this June. So when this podcast will drop, I've already been there. And my daughter is taking back, she's in college now, and she's taking a group of high school students. So she's now in charge of the high school students to try to introduce those college students to. And imagine 20 years from now, 10 years from now, maybe 5 years from now, it'll be something to have your picture with a World War II veteran and to have shaken their hand and to have been there one step further, to have been there on the beach with them, describing how they were the first person out of their landing craft running over this beach, and you're watching and imagining the landing craft right here and imagining this 17, 18, 19-year-old kid running across the beach and realizing that there's no cover, no concealment. And right up there on that hill, right there on the edge of that cliff, there was a German machine gun position pointed down at you. And like that just puts it's just a different, you can get that through books, which is fantastic. And if you don't, having gone there and stood there, it just adds a personal element to it. So it's amazing what the Best Defense Foundation does. And I'm so glad that you went last year.
Yeah, no, and I went because you recommended that we go, and I'm so grateful. Standing at Punta Hoc, when you see the bombs, the craters still from the bombs that have been overgrown, which tells its own story. Then when you walk on the beach, and the most incredible thing for me, aside from obviously spending time with these guys, is when you walk through these little Normandy towns and they have these massive parades of thousands of people lining the streets, literally crying and saying in their French accent, "Thank you for my liberty." I mean, it just was an honor of a lifetime to go and to see how much it meant for them and what freedom is really worth. It makes you really want to not take it for granted.
Yeah. And our youngest, 13, he's going to go with my wife at the same time. So our daughter and I will be helping the veterans, getting them in and out of their wheelchairs, making sure they've got their medicines, getting them to the events, like doing all that stuff. And then,
signing their cards.
Signing the cards all over the way. It's so amazing. There's
celebrities over there.
Total rock stars. Exactly. It's incredible. And you can't even do it justice. And pictures are great. The videos are great. But being there and seeing it and seeing people dressed up in these World War II uniforms, lining the streets, American flags everywhere. 82nd Airborne flags everywhere, 101st Airborne flags everywhere, the Jeeps and the trucks from that era, the motorcycles from that era, all out, and these guys going through these crazy parades with everybody yelling and waving these flags. It's so amazing to see. And then doing the school visit where these school kids are doing the same thing. And the schools were, I think they were like kindergarten through maybe even past 8th grade, but at least 8th grade. The one that we went to anyway, you go to multiple ones. And then they were just waving those flags, and it was like another parade for these guys into these schools. And then they get to talk about.
They're screaming. They're so excited that they're going to be there.
And it's real.
It's real. It's not like the teacher told them they have to be excited. It is as soon as those guys hit the ground in Normandy, every person you run into takes the time to get out and say thank you. They know when they're coming. Like you said, they do reenactments. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible and such an important lesson. And especially when you're there for D-Day and you see, then the active duty 101st Airborne there the younger guys,
Yeah.
with the guys who are 80, 70 years older than they are. It's
Crazy.
just incredible.
Yeah.
So to watch them talk and exchange stories is really a special thing.
Yeah, it really is. And it's so authentic, those school kids, because you can tell, oh, a teacher told me to be here type of thing. And it is not that. It is not that. I didn't see any school kid that was like that was forced to be there. Like they were so genuine. And it's cool to feel that too. Because, you know, you can be like, oh, it's great that they're out here doing that. No, they want to be out there doing that. This is real. They've passed those stories down. Their grandparents passed it to their parents, who passed it to them. These stories have been passed on generationally. And however they're telling those stories, it is very special and powerful, because the person who was alive then and was liberated, and that person who is in first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, you see that same. So I don't know how there was this very minimal delusion, if any delusion at all, between those stories. They passed it on and did it the right way. It's really incredible.
Well, and the kids understand that their life would be very different without the Americans and the Allies, obviously, but specifically the Americans storming the beaches. They get it. Yeah. They know that they would, because of the way that their grandparents and their parents passed those stories down and really made them understand, like, your life would be very, very different without the liberation. And they understand what that really means.
Yeah. Yeah, that was so powerful to be there in those schools. This time around, I'm trying to juggle this schedule with filming in Europe for the new show, getting to Normandy.
Busy now. You got like people, you got a team.
It's crazy.
You got all kinds of stuff going on.
It's crazy. I definitely needed it. I was about to fall over.
You have some passports in your stamp.
It's yeah, exactly.
Stamps in your passport.
That's it. I will this summer for sure. And but it's bumping up against book tour, so I had to do like, okay, but oh wait, I'm gonna miss that school day. I'm like, nope. I don't, it doesn't matter. The book is not as important as being there and being there and helping these World War II veterans, for many of them, the last time that they'll be there. So I'm like, just push it to the right. I've changed the flights, you know, like it was so powerful.
Your fans will understand. Your fans will understand.
There'll still be a book tour. It just means there's some more juggling on this end, really. And then we're going into election season here. What was it like over the last few years to see the fencing go up around the Capitol and see just being around for all that stuff? So I was at the last inauguration, and that was a little crazy. Depending on who gets elected this time, I can only imagine how crazy it's going to be. What has it been like to, because I mean, in the grand scheme, you haven't been there that long, but you have been there during a time of very intense change, I would say.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's been, I think, a lot to absorb. And I think sometimes I haven't totally processed everything that's happened over the last really 6 years. Well, not 8 years, really, almost 7 years. You're right. When Trump was inaugurated the first time, it got violent. I mean, my mom came with my husband, and they got blocked by people who made a human chain getting in. And then later in the day, they set fire to a limousine owned by an immigrant from, I think, Pakistan, who was here. And they were smashing windows. And that was kind of the beginning of what we've been seeing over the past 7 years of this organized unrest. And during Biden's inauguration, it was well, the summer before, so the summer of 2020 in DC was wild. Everything was boarded up. I have photos on my phone from that summer, and looking back through them, you're like, because when you're there at the time, it's like, okay, this is crazy, but is it that crazy? And then you kind of take a step back from it a year later and look at the photos and the video, and it's like, okay, that was insane. Everything's boarded up, everything's graffitied. You knew when it got dark, you needed to get out of there unless you were gonna have a flak jacket on and a helmet. And the Treasury Department was sprayed with spray painted with, you know, the cops are pigs and the cops are the KKK. And then Trump brought in the National Guard, and there were National Guard soldiers on the Lincoln Memorial, which I have a photo of, you know, looking out, making sure nothing happened to the Lincoln Memorial. And there were National Guard trucks on all the corners to stop the unrest, which it was necessary. I mean, I was glad that he did that, because it was getting completely out of control, and all the businesses which had been completely destroyed by COVID then were getting burned and broken into. And the city, there's this famous photo of one night where the whole city looks like it's burning. And I went to a protest during the day, and I'm just walking around, and it's just like a sea of people slaying in the street. wild. And then after January 6th, they completely overreacted by throwing up fencing like miles from anything. And you had to go through, when I went in for inauguration coverage, I had to drive all the way around town to get in. And then I had to go through like 3 different National Guard checkpoints. And I specifically drove my husband's car because I drive a Jeep with stickers on it that maybe would be a little too, volatile for the day. Like I have an NRA sticker on my car, probably wouldn't like that too much. So I drove in an inconspicuous vehicle, and I had to have like paperwork to show these National Guard soldiers just to get to work. And then the fencing stayed up for months and months and months, and nothing was accessible. I remember trying to go to the Capitol building, and you go through all these checkpoints, and then there's just National Guard soldiers everywhere. And then the story started coming out about how they weren't being fed properly. They were staying in parking garages. They were being treated very poorly, because a lot of it was just a big show, Yeah. And not to say that there weren't issues, but a lot of it, because it dragged on for so long, it was very clear that a political point was being made. And so it was a pretty crazy time to be, you look out on the Potomac and there's a Coast Guard ship with a 50 cal on the back.
Yeah.
I mean, it was pretty wild.
Yeah.
And I have no doubt that could happen again.
Oh, yeah, I remember you sending me those pictures and telling me about the checkpoints and everything in America. I mean, amazing.
I had a friend who still lives on Capitol Hill, but I went to go pick her up one day. I was like, okay, I'll come to East Berlin to get you. Don't worry.
Seriously. Yeah. Seriously.
It was pretty wild.
So crazy. It'll be interesting
felt like
to see
a totally
what
different
happens.
place.
Yeah. Gosh. And last time I was there was with you, right before COVID, right? Was it right before COVID? I think it was when I stayed in that. Didn't I stay in that like Chinese owned hotel or something?
You did.
And and I was like, what?
And it was an intelligence event at the hotel.
I know. Weird. How weird is that, right?
Yeah.
That was the first thing you brought up. And at first when I walked in, I didn't like look at my itinerary until I was probably on the plane or actually landed, like to realize where I'm going.
Exactly.
And I think the name of the hotel kind of gives away what it is. And then you go in there and you're like, oh, this is interesting. I wonder if the top floor is like all listening devices with things pointed everywhere or whatever else. Like they tried to buy up.
Well, that's every hotel in DC though. So can't get away from it.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Because I remember they tried to buy the Hotel Del, a Chinese affiliated company tried to buy the Hotel Del Coronado, which essentially overlooks, there's some other buildings in the way. And I think I would be shocked if they weren't actually in the upper floors of those buildings, the shores. They're kind of an eyesore, but they look directly down on SEAL training and more so like the headquarters elements over there.
Yeah.
But they tried to buy the Hotel Del, probably are in the shores because those.
Well, they're like, we just are interested in tourism, tourism business.
Right.
That's why we want the Hotel Del.
Well, why are you buying this one? Yeah, you're buying this one and the one in Scotland where all the subs go by that you can watch. Perfect observation. There's a few different places around the world they're doing that. Obviously, buying up farmland in the United States, land next to military bases. It's just
that's a whole other conversation. The Chinese influence. I mean, I was in a briefing on China a couple of weeks ago, and they were telling us about, just one instance of this Chinese national who's here as a student, but he has someone watching him and he just goes to the same gas station every week and he's gone for 2 hours. Oh, well, what's near the gas station? And why does he have a backpack? Oh, because there's a military installation there and he's tracking radio waves. They have all these people doing these things, and then they say that they're just there because they're interested in the gas station.
Oh, yeah. I remember I was very uneasy in that hotel. I was like, they're watching me.
I'm sorry I told you.
It was clear when I walked in. I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I know we're a little over an hour, but I want to ask you about your hunting show. I mean, what a gig! Yeah. What a gig that is. Especially, it's not just like a hunting show, like luxury lodges. Like that's not bad.
It's funny because I'm out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, totally. I know you.
Because it's like a combination of a real estate show and a hunting show. And so, I grew up hunting out of a tent or out of the truck, and we would public lands hunt. We were doing these So now I'm doing this really fun Fox Nation special, and it's the third season. I've done 15 episodes, going to Alaska. Some of the time I think this podcast comes out, I have gone to Alaska.
Nice.
We're going to do halibut fishing there, so you have to tune in and see. We did a bison hunt in Texas this season. We did coyote hunting in -6 degrees. So, even though it's a luxury hunting show, still paying my dues with the elements.
Yeah.
Done some ice fishing. Did a odd-ad hunt in Texas, which was actually real hunting. And it was a lot of fun. Had to climb up on a cliff to get them back. So that was good. And we've been on a lot of other really fun adventures all over the country. So it's been fun to go and showcase these ranches and these lodges and meet the owners and the people who work there and see what they do every day for their guests, but their ideas for what they wanted their lodge to look like and the uniqueness and the history that they put into each place. Wyoming's different than Texas, obviously, and a lot of these places incorporate the local history into your stay and to the architecture and to the art. And, there's a lot of old photos of the ranch, back when it was established. Like Cibolo Ranch, for example, in Texas is right now near Marfa. And there's tons of history there in terms of trading, where the rivers come together and all the battles that were there. And then in Wyoming, you have, Brush Creek Ranch, where they have all the old black and white photos of the pioneers who were there and the families that were on that property. And now it's this beautiful resort and hunting property. And they have an amazing restaurant now. So it's really cool to see the history of where these places, what they were and what they are now. And so that'll be fun. It's season 3. It's coming out. It's out now. So.
Awesome on Fox Nation. And did you pitch them, or did they come to you and say, hey, do you want to do something on, like, how did it start? Was it do you want to do something on Fox Nation? What would you like to do? Or did you say, I have an idea for Fox Nation? Or did they say, hey, we want you to do this luxury hunting show thing? How did that work?
They came to me with the idea, and I think because I'm the only one who really qualified.
Hey, that's a good spot, not a bad spot to be.
There's not a lot of hunters around. So it's been, and like I said, I'm definitely out of my comfort zone still, because I'm not used to walking through a lodge and explaining certain things, and I'm doing all kinds of fun stuff that I wouldn't normally do. So it's been a good time. But They asked me to do it, and I said, you know what, why not? It was a good time to do it. And so I was glad to jump on board. It's been fun. It's been a lot of work, it's over weekends because I got all my other jobs still got to do. But
seriously,
it's been a good time and been to a lot of cool places. So
awesome.
We'll see.
Yeah. You have a lot going on. I was just thinking, so over here I have this. Hold on. I'm going to see if I can. I don't know if it's going to come off the wall because this is a new studio. It used to come off, but hold on.
Don't break everything yet.
No, seriously. It's
brand new.
There we go. It comes off right here.
Yes. Is that the one we
this
bought
is the Parker. Yeah, this is it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's it. That's the Damascus barrels. I saw it on the wall. We were together in New Hampshire, and I saw this on the wall, and I was just staring at it at that place. And it was really cool. It was such a fun day. And I was like, oh, wow, that's amazing. Time. And then the guy walked up to me and he was like, oh, you know what? Do you like it? And I said, yeah. He said, want to take it down? I'm like, yeah, sure. Well, first I was like, no, I don't want to mess it up. It's a Parker with Damascus barrels. And he's like, no, don't worry. It's okay. The guy's selling it. And I was like, really?
Oh.
And so I took it off the wall and was checking it out. And then he's like, well, it's got this, on this side, this stock is cracked. And I'm like, oh, that's all right. And so I ended up with it. So
no, it was that was such a great day. We went to Sig Sauer for the morning, I think, right? Or the day before. Yeah. Did a big tour of Sig, walked the floor. And then we did the first podcast.
Yeah, that's right. That's it.
That's where we did it. And then we went pheasant hunting, and it was February, and there was 2 feet of snow on the ground.
Yeah, it's cold.
And we were tromping through that snow, and we had such a good time.
That was awesome.
And then we were just in that little lodge, and just a great weekend.
I like that lodge because you could tell it was built a long time ago, just because you
can always tell.
You can always tell it was built for smaller people. Back when people were just littler. It was like a little hobbit.
Very cozy.
Place. Yeah,
very cozy place. It was awesome.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah, that was great. And you got
a shotgun out of it. Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah. And we had a great time.
Pheasants.
Yeah. That was awesome. And for some reason the other day I was texting with your dad and I don't forget what we were talking about, but he started sending me pictures of you hunting when you were little. I think I just got back from Hawaii. That's what it was. I just got back from Lanai with my family.
Oh, yeah.
And somehow he texted something, and then I said I was just back from Lanai, and then I got this flood of Katie pictures from when you were young, and it's so awesome, so cool.
Oh, geez.
So then of course I started sending mine back with my little ones.
Oh, he loved it.
Him.
He told me about it. I actually went home last weekend, surprised my mom for Mother's Day, and he was telling me how you guys were exchanging photos of kids hunting. Yeah. He was a teacher for 35 years, and he was a hunter safety teacher for 30 years. So he just loves all that stuff, and so it makes his soul sing. Yeah, he's still getting out in the woods, doing good stuff.
So awesome. He's the
reason I'm a hunter. So I'm very grateful for that.
And I bet he was such a good hunter safety instructor. Like I can see him being so good at it, like so good with kids, and obviously just so good at everything that surrounds.
I mean, I know I'm biased because he's my dad, but it's true. He's one of the best.
That's so great. So great. And I wanted to ask you, I've never really asked you, like, how did the, and I'm going to pronounce it wrong. It's a hard thing. Yes.
Volquartsen.
Very hard for me to pronounce for some reason. How did that relationship come about? Or how did you get to know those guys
Yeah. So a couple years ago, it's been a long time now, but they just reached out and wanted to do some partnership work. And I've just been partnered with them for a long time. And I've been out to Iowa to see their facility. Nice. And Scott Volquartsen runs it now, and with his brother. And it's a family-owned business in Carroll, Iowa. It's been there for many, many decades. And they're just real good, salt of the earth, awesome people. Mm-hmm. And what I love about it is that I always get asked to take new people to shoot. And my goal is not just to take someone shooting for the first time, not that I have a lot of time to do that anymore, but when I do, I don't want them to do it once and never want to go again. Mm-hmm. And Volquartsen makes the smoothest, nicest, easiest to shoot, beautiful 22s. So if you're trying to get into it for the first time, or you don't want, you want it to be fun, obviously I have plenty of self-defense training. I've done hundreds of hours at gun sight with self-defense pistol training. But if you just want to make it a sport and have fun, it's a great way to be involved in that 22 platform. And Volquartsen is a authentic, all-American family company out of Iowa, and just really great, awesome people. And we've been out there a couple of times, and the way that they treat their employees like family, and they have this great party room, and they're just really proud of their work. And their dad started the company many, many years ago, and they do a lot of work too, contract work, I think, for Ruger and other companies as well, but they just build really nice, beautiful 22s, and it's just easy to get out and shoot a 22. It's easy to do that and to stay consistent. So but mostly they're just awesome people.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah.
And I know I gotta let you go. You probably have to go on the 5 or something, or multiple appearances.
Not today.
Not today.
It's a Jack Carr afternoon.
Oh, you're so awesome. So. You are so awesome. I did want to ask you, because I've never been there, about you went to the is it called the International Spy Museum? Is that what it's called?
I did.
And you went to the James Bond exhibit, right?
I did.
Gosh, it's only, I think it might be gone by now. I'm not sure. Maybe it's still there.
I think it's gone.
Is it?
I think they moved it out.
They had the cars.
I think they're moving it around.
Yeah.
I think they're moving it around. So look for it. Maybe it'll be in a city when you're doing your book tour. But I saw that it was coming. And the Spy Museum is 15 minutes from where I live. So I was like, I'm going to get dressed up, and we're going to go, and we're going to see all the cars. And it was really cool. They had the boats there. They had the submarine. They had the cars. They had what else? They had the motorcycles.
Nice.
I mean, it just was super cool. And then they had all of the movie posters everywhere.
So cool.
And it just was awesome. Oh, they had the jet ski too.
Nice.
So that was neat. It was like $10. It was great.
I wanted to go, and I saw that when it was going to be there, and then it just didn't. Yeah, there was no way to make it.
It was cool. It was a smaller exhibit, but it was worth it. It was really neat. Yeah, it was very, very cool.
I've never been, but I want to go.
The Spy Museum could use some of your books. They have a book shop. They have a book or a gift shop like every museum, but I think they need to balance some things out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'll go check it. I'll check it out next time I'm through. I want to stop, but I think I'll be through for the next book, for the Beirut barracks bombing book in September. I think because I want to make that book tour a little different than these ones. I don't want to go to the same places because it's a little more serious. It just seems like it. So I'm looking at some other venues that are different than the normal book tours. And so I think I'll be through DC for a couple of locations. So that'll be
the Marine Corps Museum is only 45 minutes south of DC.
I think that's on
in
the
Quantico.
List. Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you know about that.
It's on my list of places. I haven't seen anything back from my publicist.
It's close by. So it's it's not in DC, but it's in proximity. it might be a good option.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. I gave a full list of all the places that had Marine Corps ties, intelligence ties, presidential libraries, like that sort of a thing. Speaking at Reagan Library was awesome a few years ago. I know you've been there too, and you've been to the ranch and you've done the whole thing.
I know. I got to get you to the ranch. I really do.
I need to get out there.
Anytime you guys want to go.
Thank you.
Let me know. You got to get up there. It's amazing.
Yeah, I want to check it out. Michael Reagan told me that he wants to show me where they used to put the Secret Service snipers when Reagan was there.
Yeah.
Like the high ground where they used to, put those guys. But so we'll have to make it out for sure. And then also we got to talk about your cameo. And I don't know if is it a cameo if you play yourself, or is it do they call it something else? I don't even know.
I think it's a cameo.
I think it's cameo too. I think so. But in the terminal list,
I should know my terms. I'm not sure. That was one of the coolest things I've ever done. It was so awesome. I was a little bummed he couldn't come out to LA because it was COVID, right? So I did it in the van.
Isn't that crazy? Crazy in the van.
It was, and I have the script, and it was so cool. And I'm just so glad that show has been such a success, and everyone loves it. No surprise. Wow. But that was really fun. I loved it. That
was so cool. I was so glad that you got to do that and then come out for the premiere. That was awesome. Yeah. That party was awesome. I think it was one of the first parties since COVID, like there was a little bit, because Hollywood or California, I guess, stayed kind of, it was a little tougher there maybe than some other places in the country. But I think that was one of the first times where everybody really got back together after COVID, even though it was like 2 years on when the premiere happened. But that party was so fun. So I'm so glad you came out for it. That was so awesome.
Thank you for the invitation. It was epic. It was a sprint. It was awesome. We had so much fun, and wow, that was the best week. And then, cool. Like you said, you brought all the World War II guys to the red carpet. That's when I met Andre.
Okay.
Chapaz.
Andre's amazing.
My World War II vet who I chaperoned last year in Normandy. And that's where I met him for the first time. And then I got to be with him in Normandy the year after. So really special.
Is so cool. So cool.
Yeah. And I can't wait to see what you're cooking up next. I know you have lots of travel.
Yeah.
Everyone's waiting for the next book and for the next season of the show. So
lots going on. And I think this one's,
I get asked about it all the time. You have fans all over the world.
Oh, it's so cool. So cool. Amazing. This next one, if the scripts are any indication, this is going to be a good one. I mean, you never know until you actually see it, because there's so many opportunities for things to kind of derail. But if the scripts are any indication, and then I think from, what they term success, and they'll never share the numbers with us, but there's a reason there's a spinoff and a second season coming. And that's because they see the numbers that they'll never share. But that also, I think, gave us a little leeway, because I've noticed less questions from less like kind of nervous type questions coming down, like to justify certain things. So I guess you build up, just like anything in life, you build up political capital with whoever you're working with.
And trustworthy, like they trust you, right?
Exactly. Build that trust up.
It went over well, and they know what the people want. They know what the people want. Give them what they want.
Working on it.
Don't meddle. No executive meddling.
So we'll see, but excited about that. And when do I get to see you next then? We have to have a hunting trip, or
we gotta get a reunion on the calendar.
Nice.
For sure. Once you get these books out of the way, I'll definitely let me know about DC.
I will.
I'll definitely see you here for sure for your Beirut project, but we'll figure it out.
Awesome.
Been too long.
Awesome. I know. And
maybe another pheasant hunt.
I know. Crazy. But thank you so much for everything. Thanks for all your support over the years, your friendship over the years, for doing what you do every day on Fox and Town Hall and through the books, and for doing the cameo and being so awesome in the show. Appreciate everything. And gosh, hopefully I'll see you. Hopefully I'll see you soon. September, I guess, is maybe for sure book tour.
Hopefully we'll see. You never know what could happen in the next couple of weeks or months, I guess, but we'll figure something out. But awesome. It's an honor to know you, my friend.
Oh, thank you for everything.
Excited to see what you're gonna do next.
Here we go. I'm gonna go get after it, as they say. Awesome. All right. Well, take care. Thanks for everything. Bye. Until the next time, take care out there. Stay safe. Be strong. Keep fighting.